Real Country 1430 AM and 107.3 FM WRDN. Brian Winnikins, we are at the 75th Annual NAFB Convention in Kansas City. Thank you to our convention sponsors, including Annabis Silo of Durand, the Wisconsin Farmers Union. Also, Mycogen Seeds, Matt Carls, your representative serving Northwest Wisconsin, Wisconsin Soybean Association, and BASF, Ashley Gausman, your representative serving Northwest Wisconsin. And speaking of BASF, Dwayne Rathmann joins us. He's a technical services representative for BASF. Soybean growers in western Wisconsin, we've had this issue before, soybean aphids. Well, there's some new things coming from BASF, and we're going to talk with Dwayne about that. Dwayne, I know here in western Wisconsin, when we have a lot of aphids, we have a lot of Asian lady beetles. And so everybody in town hates the aphids too. We don't want any aphids because then it seems to reduce the number of the Asian lady beetles. But tell us about this new product.
Right. So we're talking about a new insecticide that was just labeled by the EPA this fall. So it'll be available for the first time in 2019 for growers. And it's very specific. It's a new mode of action insecticide specifically for soybean aphids in soybeans. The nice thing about it is that it's unique. It's a new mode of action, so that means for those who have been battling soybean aphids for many years, we've had to go back to some very old chemistries to use, and we've worn some out. Now, myself in southern Minnesota, we have resistance to both pyrethroids and the organophosphates. And so when you overuse old chemistries like that, that's going to happen. So the nice thing when you have a new mode of action, it will control those resistant pests. And you talked about lady beetles. The other unique thing about this product is very specific. It will control soybean aphids very quickly and very effectively, but it will not harm that lady beetle, which, although you maybe don't want them crawling on your house, they're Mother Nature, and they do a good job of controlling soybean aphids as well. So the environmental profile is nice that it controls the soybean aphid, but it won't have any appreciable harm to things like predators, beneficials, even pollinators. Has no special bee restrictions, for example.
Now, you mentioned the aphids that have become resistant to some of the old chemistry. So how is this going to be managed so that we don't have a new resistance? Ashley and I have talked a lot about weed resistance and some of the new management practices that we have to use. Will there be new management practices with this?
Right. Management practices for resistance really don't change. We have a new mode of action. That's great. We have another tool to use to alternate. But that is the key, is to alternate modes of action as much as possible. And the other important thing is not to use an insecticide when it's not warranted. So the threshold that's recognized for soybean aphid is 250 aphids per plant. Many times growers may use an insecticide when they just see a few because they're going across a field anyway. That's really not good for them in the long run, because that kind of unnecessary use can build up resistance. So using thresholds and alternating modes of action are the two best management practices for avoiding resistance.
Now, I know every state's different with the requirements to be able to use the product. Will there be any special type of requirements that you know of where you have to have training, and like the dicamba issue?
Sure. And Scalus insecticide, or Safina is the brand name that soybean growers will be using in 2019. There's really no special precautions. In fact, it's not even for an insecticide. It's not even a restricted use product, just because of its a profile that is so specific. So it's going to be very easy for growers to use, no special regulations or testing or anything like that. And it's just a general use pesticide, not restricted use.
We're talking with Dwayne Rathmann. He is a technical services representative for BASF this morning at the 75th Annual NAFB Convention. Dwayne, aphids, a lot of times they're obviously later in the growing season. So is there a window? Okay, Brian is going out scouting his fields, and he's like, oh boy, I went from 10 aphids to 300 overnight. Do I have a certain window that this product is that I have to really use it for?
The window to use in Scalus insecticide is really just like any other insect control. You want to treat by the time you get to the threshold. But you're right. Scouting is something that's just you have to do, and aphids can just multiply so fast. So you really have to scout sometimes every 3 to 5 days if you see those populations increasing, and catch them in time. The nice thing about Inscalus or Safina insecticide for soybeans is that it controls aphids very fast. Within hours of application, those aphids stop feeding. And we really are looking for an insecticide that would do that, because that's so important to stop that damage when you see that threshold hit.
Some great advice. Again, Ashley we'll be talking with Ashley Gaussman, I'm sure, a little bit more about this in the coming months as well. That's Dwayne Rathman. He's Technical Services Representative for BASF from the 75th Annual NAFB Convention in Kansas City. I'm Brian Winnikins for Real Country 1430 AM and 107.3 FM WRDN.